One. Hey everyone, it's I, the real Randy Chavez, coming at you today with Jenn Pickett. We are here today in the. Sorry, Wes, you got excited when you saw my fridge in the background. I've moved and my beloved fridge is gone. So
Oh no.
I know it happens every now and then. So last time you were on, we talked about your start on TikTok, the you being a published author, and you said you had you had a picture book come out, and that's from the comedy channel, right?
Yes. So it's called Bean the Buck-Toothed Vampire. Um, yeah. So I had this idea a long time ago that it would be funny if there was a vampire that didn't have fangs, that he had like bubba teeth or like buck teeth.
Yep.
And I don't know why, I just found it hilarious. And I said it in front of my husband, and he wrote a picture book about it, and I illustrated it. And it turned out to be really fucking awesome. And you should all buy it.
Okay. Where can we get that?
You can technically order it pretty much anywhere online, Barnes and Noble, and some small bookstores carry it, Target, Walmart. But when you order it from Amazon, we do get a higher PayPal, so we
Okay.
prefer you to buy it through Amazon.
I will go and I will put your TikTok down below.
Okay.
I forgot to do that in the description, so that was my B. That was my bad. But I will put that in link down. Oh, put that in the comments down below.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
yeah, no problem. I One of the things that I saw, I guess most recently, was the kid that solved his own murder or solved a murder by he had a deformed arm that only went down like a certain amount of way.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Tell us about the kid that did that.
So there are two major cases that I've researched about that have to do with a past life having to do with murder.
Mm.
And they're two of my more popular videos, so they can get confusing. One
Yeah.
of them is a child who was the victim of a murder, and at 3 years old was able to point to his accuser, find his buried body, and all that, which is wild. But the one you're talking about is a kid who remembered being the killer in a past life. So he said he was born with his arm shorter than the other, and also on his hand, his fingers were smaller. And he said it was because he used that hand to kill his fiance in the past. And so he was born, I guess, as a repercussion or as a reminder in this lifetime. And he said this at like 2 years old. That was, he never seemed bothered by it. He was very open, like, oh yeah, I have this arm because of what I did in the past life, which
Yeah, geez. Can
kids.
someone
And then some people will naturally argue that if you're born in a culture that is comfortable with reincarnation, that it would be natural for a kid to talk about that. And there's truth to that. But we're talking about a kid who had access to information that like his own mother and siblings didn't know, so that's where it gets like tricky, because if you're a skeptic, like, you can find holes in things that make sense, but there comes a point when the only way you can deny it is if you were literally ignoring the evidence, like if you pretend that it's not true. So in this case, this kid, he also claimed, it gets a little confusing, so I'll do my best, but his father in the present life, so he's a 2-year-old, his father was his older brother in the last life. So he's saying in the same lifetime, which is why it's confusing. So before this kid was born, his father had a little brother who was dead. And the mother of the little boy knew that her brother-in-law was dead. She was told that he died of natural causes a long time ago. The kid was born in like 1940 something, and the little brother was dead in 1928. But then, because the little kid kept saying, "Oh yeah, I killed my fiance because she did this and blah blah
yeah.
blah. This is why my arm was born this way," and he would say, "Oh, and my dad he's really my older brother." And so he kept giving so much so much information that the wife finally went to the husband like, "Is any of this true?" And then the father was like, "Yeah, my little brother did kill his ex-wife, his fiance, and he was actually executed, and I never told you." And so like all this stuff that the kid said was true. And again, the people can argue, oh, well, if it was in the family, then the kid had access to this information. But the mother didn't know, and the older siblings. So why would the father, first of all, he was ashamed of this. Why would you
Yeah.
brag and tell this to your child? Where does he benefit from telling his 2-year-old to pretend to be his little brother?
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, and then the story behind that is that in that custom, if I'm remembering correctly, the ceremony was two parts. So you had the contract drawn up for an arranged marriage, and then after the legal part, there was usually maybe like a little festivity, and then the wife, fiance, would go live with the husband. That was the second part. In this case, the woman had the legal contract drawn up, so she was his wife, but also sort of his fiance because the second part hadn't been done. And when he went to bring her home from her parents to live with him, she wouldn't go, and she embarrassed him and all this stuff. He thought she was involved with another man, so he walked back to his home and got like not a machete, but some kind of thing of that effect. Went back to threaten her and ended up actually killing her. And yeah, and he also had a concave place on his ribs where one rib was shorter than the other. He claimed that was because where he stabbed her, that was why he was born. That was his take. And then so the man who researched this is a scientist. He was a university director in Virginia, really well known. He didn't have any kind of spiritual take on reincarnation, but he was very much using a scientific method. He only wanted stuff that could be, in his eyes, proven or documented.
Like first principles.
In this case, he had access to the court records because this man was, ultimately executed for his crime. And so it's just very fascinating to have all these different angles.
Yeah. I mean, you see a lot of this coming out now because like there's the internet and, the stories can be shared more readily. And you have these like subcultures pop up that are really interested in that. This happened in what, 1939, 1940, you said? Because that's when he was assassinated or killed in 1940.
He was executed in 1928, and I'd have to remember the year. It was like 1940s when this kid was born.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. So that was. Oof. When do you see more of these stories happening now, or do you think that more of them happened when they were, like 80 or 100 years ago, and there was just no record of it because you'd probably be sent to a loony bin?
Well, most of the cases that I have studied thoroughly were because they were done by, there's very few people who research it in a very scientific way who have credibility. Hoping that will change in modern days. But because I've researched so heavily a man who's dead, so most of his research was like, he was doing this in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So all his cases are like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. You do have modern writers and researchers, but what I think is interesting is it's very much still current and rampant. Even every time I post a video, I mean, I get so many comments of like, maybe not people who have like this level of information, but like when we're paying attention, kids talk about this shit all the time. They'll make comments about, oh yeah, mommy, remember in my last life, you were pregnant and then we died in that fire. So I had to come back and be your son in this life. Like that's a weird thing for a kid to say. But in America, we're kind of conditioned to be like, oh, our kid has a weird imagination, or we it's the devil, or we don't pay any attention to it. And then because of the internet and people talking about more famous or more in-depth reincarnations, people start paying attention. And so they're starting to notice that on average, kids do acknowledge this in all kinds of countries and all kinds of ways. But as far as cases that are like more heavily involved, I don't think there's less or more necessarily. I think that we have less, the people who were like really researching it just aren't alive anymore. And so I'm trying to be that new person who like carries the torch, maybe. I don't know, that tries to like, let's talk about this. And I have to bridge the spiritual aspect with the scientific, because it's not my job to convince anybody, but I understand why a person intellectually may be closed off to stuff, So if you have like some kind of like actual evidence, like that's natural human nature to be more open to it.
So you get, there was one that you researched a couple months ago where it was this kid that he knew about his mom, I think, from his past life. He was like this lady's son, and I forget, his like Scott William or William Holden or William some. He described the house perfectly. Used to have red tiles on the house, and eventually his parents.
Yeah, this is actually a little girl. I think that
Oh,
you're
okay.
talking about the crease where, yeah, and a lot of, I don't know why I got a lot of comments where people were like, "Oh, this was proven to be a scam," and I'm like, I have researched this so much, and I have no idea if it has been proven as some scam. I don't know that information, and I would love. I've asked people to send me their link. I
Well,
actually, I'll go into the story for your listeners, but when I first posted about this, it was so cool because the cousin of this girl reached out to me and was like, "I remember when this
the
happened."
article came out.
Yeah, and I took it to school as a show and tell situation. And this is a fun little twist that made me happy. When I posted about it, I did auto captions, and it so her name was spelled with a Y, I think, Romy, Romy, but the auto captions spelled it like I or IE or something. And the cousin spelled it correctly in her comment. And somebody tried to call her out on it and was like, "Oh, if that's your cousin, why doesn't your spelling match the captions?" And I'm like, actually, those are auto captions, and the cousin was correct. So I don't think she's full of shit. She like actually, then
Yeah.
I got to talk to her a little bit outside of that video, which was very cool for me. But that case was pretty epic, and they all start to blur together. So if I'm a little inaccurate here, go with my original video about it. But yes, this is a little girl who had very many details about. She just talked about her life, and she missed her mother from her past life, and her mother from the past life she said was still alive, and she wanted to visit her. And I think she was a boy. That's what you're thinking of with the name William. She was a
Oh,
boy.
yeah.
And I think this was also like in the 60s or something, where it was like phone book, not internet. She finally convinced her mother to go visit that town, and she had some other investigators and stuff involved, so they were witnesses to, which doesn't happen often. When a researcher gets involved, the families have already connected, and then you have to figure out how much was organic and how much got exchanged. But in this case, the researchers were present when they met for the first time. So yeah, they go to this town and they look up the phone book and they find the address, but they don't even need it because the little kid who's never been to this town takes them straight to the house. When they get to the house, one of the things she had acknowledged was, "Oh, what happened? There used to be red tiles, but like this looks like the house, and don't use the front door, only use the back door." She doesn't like the front door. They get there, there's a sign on the front door that says, "Please go around back." And they, on the way, she was like, "Oh, we need to stop and get this certain kind of flowers. It's my mom's favorite." And then they brought the flowers, and the old lady who didn't know these people answered. She's like, "Oh, my son used to give me these blue flowers. That's so sweet of you. I miss him." She comes in. I'm sure the old lady was like, "What the fuck?" Because this little kid is like, "I was your son, and I know all this stuff about your life, even though the internet doesn't exist, and I've never met you."
So they
And
rolled in like 4 people deep because it was the kid, the parents, and the
yes,
investigators. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
there were two different investigators. It was like a professor and his wife, and then like a reporter. So it was someone who was like a professor in these kind of studies and a reporter, and then yeah, the parents. And yeah, and she asked her about the roof, and they were like, "Well, there was some kind of storm, it damaged the roof. We did change the color of the tiles. It did used to look like this." And then the old lady had a picture from the last time this man was alive. When he was alive, he was a grown man. He died as a grown man.
Yeah.
So he had a wife and kids. And she had a picture from like Christmas or something with the whole group. And this little girl was able to name every person in the photo that she had never met in this lifetime. How do you explain that? You know, like what other, I would love to know. Some people will say, I guess, a ESP, that she can tap into the woman's mind. Dr. Ian Stevenson also explored that. He does 100% believe in ESP. There is definitely like truth to that, in my opinion. But he has enough in-depth research to say there are certain things. For example, in some cases, it can't be ESP, because if a person is picking up the thoughts from another person,
Yeah.
but that information is wrong, you know what I mean? Then they would be wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So if I'm looking at you and I'm like, and you think, "Oh, my sister used to have a blue car," and I'm like, "No, your sister, I was your sister. I had a red car." If I was picking up from you, I would say blue car. But
Yeah.
later, "Oh, your memory was wrong." And that's happened. There have been people who tried to dispute a case
That
because
makes sense.
but the
I
personality remembered the correct information.
I remember once, I think it was, or I saw it in 2012. I think it was on like I think it was on not the Hub, or it was like a Sci-Fi channel, or I think it was a Science channel. I don't think it was Sci-Fi, where they did. I think Dr. Michio Kaku was part of it, and it was part of the experiment where somehow they made like the electromagnetic spectrum around one person the same as like somebody else that was like in a whole other building. And they showed one person, again, a whole separate building, a series of lights, and the other person like, oh, I'm seeing a bunch of lights. And so do you think, is that what ESP is? I'm not 100% sure, or I haven't
So
really gone down that road.
I have not researched this as thoroughly as reincarnation, but it's another subject that I find very fascinating, and I've definitely studied some of it. I think in general, it's extrasensory perception can include anything like clairvoyance or premonitions. So I think it's like a broad umbrella for like telepathy. So whether you can predict the future or whether you can communicate. I mean, even something as simple as you're thinking about a person and then they call you within 5 minutes, or someone you haven't thought of in 6 months, but you suddenly get an email. Like that's a version
Yeah.
of it. We're supposedly communicating all the time beneath the surface, but that sixth sense is really if we're just tapped in and paying attention to it. It could be like you have a dream about a tornado and you wake up and there's alarms going off, or you call your brother to be like, hey, don't go down this road. And then when he goes down the road an hour later, there's been a tree that fell. I think
Yeah.
it's a broad term for a lot of stuff, but that I feel like definitely qualifies with the
Yeah,
lights.
those things are weird. Where it's like, I remember this one dude. It was after 9/11, so there was a lot of like paranoia in the air. And this one, and this wasn't like a terrorist attack that something just happened with the plane, it went down. But this guy was just like, he had a really bad feeling in his stomach. It was like he was baby Grogu and he was trying to take the controls. Like, no, we can't go here because he feels it in the force.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and he's like, I have a really bad feeling. Doesn't get on the flight. Everyone's like, you're crazy. Like, what's going on? And then the flight goes down. He's like, knew it, knew it.
yep, yeah. And then people get into I think they're uncomfortable with that because they're like, well, why do some people get that and others don't? And then you get into a whole other territory of like, again, how many people are like open to it and sensitive to it. And like, we all have our own triggers, and how many times have you had a feeling that you ignored and then it did turn, and you can take I think the most skeptic person you can find, but if they had a dream that they were in line behind a person with a blue coat and then they got on a plane and it crashed, if the next day they're in line behind a person with a blue coat, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
There's going to be something that whether they go through with it or not, like it's, but how many of us are conditioned to pay attention to it? That's the
And
real thing.
I mean that at some point, maybe it's like a leftover thing for like an evolutionary advantage. Like back in the day, like, oh, if I go this way, I feel like there's going to be a giant saber-toothed tiger. It's going to maul me. And the
Yeah.
people that listened to it obviously got to live. But then as time goes on and you're not out like hunting anymore and you just become more modern, maybe that gets diluted. The people that would have died, suddenly their genes get passed on. So maybe it's something left over.
Yeah, there could be some of that. You also, if you tap into the reincarnation aspect of it, then you also factor in how many lives have you lived? Have you evolved as a soul so you're more sensitive to this? Like
Good point.
there's, you know, maybe you did get killed in the first generations, but maybe you've had enough lifetimes that you've like learned to pay more attention to that. Maybe your ghost was like, shit, that tiger killed me. Maybe next time I'll listen.
That's fair. The So I love ghosts. Like I saw two, or I think I saw two in my day. What type of
Oh,
experience have you had in the supernatural?
so I suck in that I hardcore believe in this shit, but I haven't had a lot of personal experience with paranormal outside of precognitive dreams. I'm pretty good about that type of stuff. And again, so I believe mostly because I believe intellectually. My husband, on the other hand, when the first night I ever stayed over at his house, I woke up to him around 3 o'clock in the morning saying, "Don't look at them and they'll go away. Just don't look at them. Don't make eye contact." And I'm like, what is this shit? And I thought he was dreaming, maybe, talking in his sleep. And then because he is, prankster comedian, I, for several months, thought every time something like this happened that he was just fucking with me. But he sees energy. He's always seen spirits and ghosts. So he has a bunch of stories. I don't really have I have some interesting stories, but not like that. I want to hear your
Yeah,
apparition
sure.
stories.
So it was 2011. I was in Ohio. Have you ever been to Ohio?
No, my son says it's not real.
Amazing. Outside of like the big cities, like, you know, Cleveland or Columbus or wherever, Cincinnati, there's a bunch of these like towns that barely have any population. And I had my friend Patty, her then girlfriend Sabrina, like she just wanted to go on a road trip. It's like, hey, can you come? I was like, yeah, sure, you know, I'll go. Um, and we go there and we meet her girlfriend Sabrina, and then we meet her parents. And we were gonna stay at her parents' place, but then she says, well, we have this place, we have a barn, and we're building another house right next to the barn. You can, you know, go there and you can, like, you know, camp out. And like, all right, you know, we can camp out. And there's nothing but like fields and roads in the, I think it's Tiffin and Gibsonburg, like really small towns that nobody's ever heard of unless
Yeah.
you're from there.
Right.
And we go there and it's pitch black. Like there's no street lights, there's no anything. There's just some stars. And we go and there's a little 1-story school that is so small. It's like, this is maybe for like one classroom. Like it looked really small.
Wow.
And that was across the street. So we go we start a campfire, and I notice there's like a light. It looks like there's like a spotlight shining down on top of the roof. And I go and I on the roof of the school across the street.
Okay.
So we're a couple hundred yards away from it. And I go to my friends, like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's probably a ghost. And I was like real, like, I feel like, okay, I'm the new person here trying to scare me. And at this time, I'm like 20 years old. I was a boxer. I was like, you're not going to scare me, guys. I'm like, no, like it happens all the time. Like we see weird shit when we're Skyping. And like, there's so like even, and I was like, okay, all right. They seem like pretty truthful. And I'm going, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go see it. Like, don't see it. Like, you know, we don't know what that happens. You know,
Yeah.
the girl Sabrina, she's like, hey, listen, we've had some things chase us before, and it's really freaking scary, and we never stay around. And I was like, okay, so I have to go. I want to see if I can fight it. So I get to the so I get to the and right now I don't really see anything. I just see like this light. So I get to the front of the barn, and I notice it looks like a dress. Like somehow science has made it so that this dress is just on strings. It's like, you ever see Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah.
Where Keira Knightley has a bunch of strings and she's dangling a dress to make people think that there's a ghost. And I was like, there's got to be a clothesline somewhere and someone's moving it, because I see the dress moving and there's nobody in the dress.
Oh.
So I get to the front. Yeah. So I get to the front of the barnyard, like to the edge of the road. And there's a woman that's like dancing in the dress. And I was like, okay, all right. You know, and you know, so she looked like, well, she looked like Lady Galadriel from Lord of the Rings, like in that scene.
Oh.
She's like, yeah, like you do not have a Dark Lord, you have a queen, but she was like nice, you know. So
Yeah.
I get like halfway to the road, and I notice that she's actually like 8 feet tall, and you know the type of consistency she would be like Casper, like that's the type of skin and the dress and whatever. But I almost transparent though, where I could see through it. I was like, it's tall, like she have like acromegalia, it's like gigantic, like whatever it is. I'm thinking like I gotta at least talk. And then I get to the other side of the road where I'm on the grass. So I guess I'm on the property now of this school. And suddenly she stops and she looks at me with these piercing red eyes, like the eyes you would see in photos, like from like the 90s where you take a picture. And I was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. So I am like, I think this takes like 10 minutes. It probably took like a minute or two, but I'm slowly, the way that like Batista's like eating those like nuts and he's like, you can't see me, I'm invisible.
Yeah.
I'm slowly trying to make my way back. And eventually I get to some part of this road where she just goes back to dancing. And then I pick up the pace and I book it. So my friends, like, guys, and I'm freaking out. Like, you never guess what I saw. And they're just like, yeah, see, we told you, we fucking told you. And I was like,
yeah.
And it was weird because now that I had already seen it, now I can see her and the dress. I can see everything. She's still dancing. And I tried to take a picture with like my Razor cell phone, and it just looked like I was trying to take a picture of the moon. You couldn't really tell what it was.
I hate when that happens, and that is the hard part because
you had a story with a UFO.
Yeah, I look back and even when I look at the footage, I'm like, I'm stupid. This was a plane. But I was there with 5 people and we're all like, planes don't do this. Um, it was just such erratic behavior where
Yeah.
we had just walked down to the beach and there's a lot of plane activity. So there are plenty of planes flying around.
Mhm.
But we saw this light that just was hovering and I thought it was a star at first. And I was like, what or planet? I was like, it's so bright. What is that? That's just hanging out. And we were trying to Google like what planet is suddenly visible or something. And
Yeah.
then it started moving, but not, it was like, we were like, are we seeing things? Is it the clouds? It was like moving. And then it was like erratic moving. And then it had colors and then it didn't. And then it just all of a sudden, and then people would say, okay, well, a plane, if it's coming towards you, does look stationary at first. We're like, okay, but why would it suddenly be erratically moving? And then it just went from moving, looking stationary to moving super fast past us. And we turned to look past it and turned around, and another one had replaced it in the exact spot. And we're like, all scream, like, what the fuck just happened? And then another one appeared next to it. And we're like, what is this? And then, of course, we're all filming. But when you look at it, the only footage that really came out was that there's a picture I have where it looks really, really bright and it's reflecting on the ocean so bright that it's like the moon. It's so you can see the reflection on the water. But even the other picture I have, it never turns out, like what you're seeing with your eye. It just looks, and then you look back and you're like, I'm crazy. I could, but then if it's aliens, they're smart and they will use screens and things to make it look like something it's not. So many people have gone under hypnosis and they were like, oh, I saw this giant owl and then I lost 3 hours. And then they're like, oh, it wasn't an owl. When they go under hypnosis, it was something else.
That was the aliens. Like, I've seen the fourth kind. I know exactly what that means.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of fun stuff. But I will say that I think that there's, probably bad aliens, just like there are bad humans. But I do think that most aliens are just advanced beings and that our interpretation makes it scarier than it really is. I don't know if you're familiar with Dolores Cannon, but she really she gets into, well, she is dead now, but she got into hypnotherapy accidentally, and then she discovered past life regression. And this is where like my two worlds meet, because past lives is how she started. And then she started having people who remembered lives on other planets as other entities and other planes. So we're talking about reincarnation, but also like not everybody here has been a human the whole time. So like it's like a mixture of like, oh, I had this existence and I'm more advanced, but I had to come here to help Earth, or oh, I needed to learn this lesson, so I came to the school of Earth and basically had to cram my evolved soul into a human experience for further. That shit goes real.
I never thought of that before. For whatever reason, I always thought like if we're doing the incarnation thing, maybe like humans last level, and you have to, you start out as an ant and then like a dog, a bear, and then you get to human. I never thought of it as one universe and they have to do this experience.
Supposedly we're like, for them, the equivalent of like an amoeba. So like we may be more advanced than an ant, but they and that's what I was saying too. There are some experiences that seem to be interpreted negatively, but they're saying, though there are some that have like their own needs, the real difference is kind of like if you look at our human experience, you have people in our history who were scientists and they weren't necessarily like trying to be cruel, but maybe they did things to like chimpanzees or rats because of experiments, and they thought, well, this is a lesser being and like it's better to test it on this animal than a human, and they were trying to advance scientifically. And then you have other people who are like, hey, let's not treat any living creature, without some level of kindness and consideration. And so supposedly that's kind of how aliens are. The different categories are like, hey, there's some who are like, we're just trying to learn from these creatures. And some of them don't even understand that we experience pain or fear because they're detached from that experience. And so they've had to learn to be gentle with us. And then others basically there's like a council that are like looking out for humans the way that we look out. We have people who look out, like, I don't know, PETA and stuff that look out for animals. There's like this council that's like, hey, we have to be nicer to the humans because even though they're way less than we are, like somebody has to like care about their feelings. But yeah, we're pretty bottom level on the totem pole.
So that kind of makes sense. And I don't know if you've ever taken like psychedelics. I personally love Lucy, but I had a experience with mushrooms once where it was actually my first time taking mushrooms. I'm in my friend's room. I black out the room, and I go right past like the Milky Way, right past Andromeda Galaxy. I don't know where in the universe I'm looking. It's somewhere that way. And I go and I take a look at, I'm looking at these two solar systems that are pretty similar to ours. There's like, I don't know how many planets over here, and then over yonder, there's another sun, and there's another thing of solar systems, and they were talking to each other. Either the universe is just planets are just cells, and they're organs. Like either solar systems are organs, and the galaxies are organ systems, or there was a being that was so vast and so large that it had not only control of Earth, and it was so smart and so well populated that it had control of all the rest of these planets over here and the next solar system as well. Yeah, and I saw that and I thought that if this is a game, if the universe is like a VR game or whatever type of game, and the reason why the population has grown so much is because the game, this Matrix has gotten so popular, and that's why the population's gone up. Humans are not even like a player on the board. Like humans are just, because we can't do any of that. Like maybe we have control of, like, we can influence the weather with HARP or whatever, but we can't actively control it. So yeah, I just wanted to say
yes and no, because as a human, yeah, we're pretty bottom level, but when we are able to tap into like our bigger entity, it's almost like the avatar figuring out is being created by a human or whatever. Then you evolve your consciousness, so it gets very convoluted. It's funny that you said that about the galaxies, though, because you are very on par with a lot of the stuff. Because if you've have you heard of Jane Roberts or Seth Speaks? I feel like we maybe mentioned that in the past. That's probably
tell me that.
My favorite. That would be like my Bible, because he covers all the shit: reincarnation, parallel lives, consciousness and beyond consciousness, aliens, all this shit. So Jane Roberts is credited as the writer. I guess she's more like a medium. But Seth, is a guy who basically finished his reincarnation cycles. And so it's like, hey, let me give y'all some insight. So he is like an evolved entity, non-physical being who like just is an educator for humans. But that makes me sound like a crazy person. But when you read it, you're like, the material makes sense. So whether this is like, I mean, what now?
Send me the link for that.
I will. It is my favorite book. Yeah. Oh, in another timeline, that didn't happen.
Okay. I love alternate universes. I love that theory. Yeah. I love, like, I had this weird dream the other day where it was, I don't know if it's like Inception, but you get like double or triple dreams. I don't know if you ever had those where you think you wake up and then you don't wake up, and then you actually wake up. What about death in dreams? Do you think that's you witnessing the death of your alternate universe self, or do you think that some of us have quantum immortality where we die in one universe, we get transported to another where things are mostly the same but slightly different?
Oh, I don't claim to be an expert on any of that. But I do think that dreams they are a lot of things. So you do have alternate selves and you do have access. You're supposedly, again, according to the Seth book, that he says that dreams are the same reality as when you die. You never completely exist, like stop existing. Like you never fully die. Like your entity, your energy will never full, your human body will, but like you don't ever actually die. So we're all immortal. But when you are dreaming, that is the same level of reality that you experience when you die. It's the same plane of reality. So sometimes you are dreaming and you are actually having experiences with people who are dead, and you're really
Yeah.
having that experience. And sometimes it's you working out a problem for yourself with that person for the next life or from a past life, so that you don't have to keep. And sometimes you're just planning your next day, or in this lifetime. Sometimes, like, the dream category gets really deep, because some people supposedly, when they're sleeping, their body is actually doing other jobs, like you're helping other souls cross over, or you're helping babies be born, or you're learning things for, I mean, like, it gets, he even says that in this lifetime that we space out all the time, that our body is not solid, that it's pulsating and it's blinking, and that time is so different in these other realities, that like when you walk into a room and you forgot what you were doing, that you probably actually bounced to another reality to get information. That sometimes your dreams are your past selves contacting you, or your other selves working out a problem. So you could be actually dying and informing yourself about information, or you could be just experiencing it so that you can change your path for the, I mean, there's like so much, but like dreams are significant for sure. It's like your way of like having access. It's like Earth existence when you're awake is the test. But when you go to sleep, you're studying, you're getting the information. So then when you wake back up, you're trying to remember, trying to see how much of that information you can use in this lifetime. Or as he says, the waking self is the dream self to the dream self.
Yeah.
This life is a dream to the other version of us, which again sounds crazy.
I love stuff that sounds crazy up front, and then you dig in deep to it. Like if you were to just read something, like just read a transcript of, like, let's say like a Bob Lazar interview, like this dude is nuts. But then you see like a video, and then you see like evidence. No, he was actually at Area 51 and did these things, and it's like, oh, okay, this actually makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes I'm like, I love talking about it, but until you read some of this, I can't do it justice. On that, I don't know if you saw the bilocation video I did.
Yes.
That is a great example of something that, like, when you read that, you just go through life like, what happened? But I had already read a book that described this as a possibility. So when I read a Reddit post of somebody experiencing, I was like, I know what that is. So it's my favorite thing about all the stuff that I've read is when the information overlaps. Like if I'm reading Jane Roberts, Dolores Cannon, Ian Stevenson, and they're all unrelated to each other, but they're saying the same things, like that's when I pay attention. Like something is going on here that we just have been ignoring.
So you mentioned before hypnosis, and you had a video where you were under hypnosis, but you asked yourself questions beforehand, and then you were talking in the third person.
Yeah.
You reminded me of that before the hypnosis, and then I've had dreams in the third person. What does that mean? Does that mean that some of us might have multiple personalities? Like, at least, I mean, I feel like everyone has at least two. Like you have like a lazy one, and then you have a determined one.
Yeah.
But
I mean, really, you have a lot of personalities that you have, because you have like the super self and the entity that like is basically the player or the actor. This is the analogy that is used in Seth Speaks. You are an actor, and then you have multiple roles. You have somebody like name an actor. Johnny Depp. You have Johnny Depp is the actor. He's also Captain Jack. So he's also what's the candy guy? Edward
Willy
Scissorhands.
Wonka, and
Willy
then he's
Wonka.
Edward Scissorhands, and then okay.
Right. So this lifetime is your Captain Jack. So, but really you're Johnny Depp. So your super self is the actor, and then you have all these characters, and every human life is just a script that you wrote, is a character that you're playing. And the problem is that we forgot that we're the actors, like method acting. You've forgotten. And that's what the whole point of this is, to remind you, like, But the reason that you forget is so that you take it seriously until you've evolved enough that you can handle it. So what happens is the reason, and supposedly planet Earth is one of the only places and the only existences where you forget. You go into it and it's like as part of the test is that you forget that you are the actor. You forget that you have all these other experiences and that you're more powerful because you won't take it seriously. You won't take the script seriously. You'll half-ass it. So if you think this is all there is the only life I have, then you take your problems more seriously and that's how you evolve. But then people get stuck on the karmic wheel, which is not in terms of punishment, but like just a pattern that you can't break for yourself. It's not like, oh, there's some God that's like, this is your karma. It's like karmic will in this case is like you're drawing the same type of experiences because you've gotten so lost in the role of Captain Jack that like you've forgotten that you have a real family, that you're an actor, that you have all these other things to do. Yeah.
So there's how old are you? Did you ever watch Doug when you were younger?
Yes.
Okay. So you know how he used to have like the Indiana Jones version of him and like the Quail Man version of him?
Yes.
So that was great. I want to see like a whole Quail Man spinoff. Yeah. I've only told this to 2 friends. I feel like there's a lot of different parts of me. Like there's the boxer part. There was the veterinarian assistant part, is the one that loves animals. There's like, the military part. And every now and then when I have an issue, I will like try to like a deep meditation. I'll like put something over my face. I'll lay in bed and I'll pretend that there's like 10 of me at this like round table, like all discussing like the best things to do. And every now and then I dream that. And we have K Collection saying that as a kid, I had the most vivid dream. I don't dream as much anymore, and read that smoking weed can make you dream less. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, there's truth to that. And alcohol.
Okay. Yeah, I know
but
Yeah.
You're still dreaming, you're still having nightly experiences, but like your brain's ability to remember it is stunted. Yeah.
Gotcha. I do remember that where actually I think if you drink enough alcohol, you don't dream. I forget. Yeah. So
well, yes and no. Yeah, scientifically they would say that, but like really it's really just like they used to also say that you don't make memories for the first 3 years of life, and then they found out that's not true. That you don't remember them in your waking life consciously, but they still exist. So those experiences at night don't stop happening, but your ability to recall them is affected.
I think because I didn't know like the hippocampus, I think it starts developing around 18 months, so people can have memories there, but hippocampus doesn't fully develop until like years later. So that's why there's memories when you're younger so scarce.
Yeah. So it's like the balance of the scientific world versus what we're still learning. So like even like they before past lives became as known, they were helping people with phobias and trauma because they were able to regress them to like their birth experience to the first year of life. And then they had people, adults, who could like verify. So if a person has this phobia or this trauma and then they're regressed and they're like, oh, when I was a 1-year-old, my mom dropped me and I landed and hit my head on this thing, and then I witnessed my father slam her head against the red cabinets of my Aunt Lucy's house, and something crazy like that. And then the mom say, who consciously remembers, yes, there was a situation, your Aunt Lucy did have red cabinets, how did you possibly know that, and this did happen. So they were able to prove that like we do make memories. And here's the thing, anything that happens in this lifetime or parallel, you have access to all of it. We just haven't like trained ourselves to tap into it. But like there is the global mass consciousness, and then there's the individual consciousness. Like once a thought or experience happens, it doesn't technically go away. Like it always exists.
Jeez. So that's, and I guess someone could tap into that. Like, so if let's say you can't remember stuff with sleeping, like when you sleep, your brain releases a little bit of DMT. Could you go and just take DMT or ayahuasca, like, synthetic form, and then just happen to go and tap into any of the lives that you've seen while you were dreaming?
I'm sure that's happened. I mean, I'm not educated on that, but like it seems logical to me.
We got to do a bunch of drugs. We got to for science.
Next podcast.
That'd be great. Is there any funding right now that goes and any like scholarships, whatever, that says like, oh, PhD students or whatever that are interested in this, you get this $20,000 or $50,000 scholarship for your experiment?
I don't know. There should be. That's not something that I guess because on one hand, this stuff is all new to me. I've only really started the last 2 years. To my
Yeah.
credit, I've read like 18 books about this subject alone, and I watch documentaries. I've interviewed people. Like I've done the work as much as I can, but in terms of like, that's something I hadn't even considered. I just did this as a hobby or as a personal path. And then the more that I study, I'm like, more people should know about this. I would love to
Yeah.
pursue this. So that's an interesting thing for me to look into. And again, most of the people that I've read I started like in way back when. So like there are people, Dolores Cannon only died in early 2000s. And
Mhm.
I think Brian Weiss, who's known for reincarnation studies, may still be alive. But a lot of these people have passed on. So like, I
Yeah.
guess there's a new generation trying to pursue it, hopefully.
So do you think that's like your calling now? Do you think that's like, hey, this is people need to know about this, and I don't see anybody else really pushing this, and I need to be the one to do it?
I wouldn't say it's a calling in the sense of like a predestined thing per se, or even my personal responsibility. I'd say that I think it's interesting, and there's clearly an audience for it. I think that it also does help people. It I got so into it because it cured my anxiety. I had a lot of stress and stuff attached to trying to accomplish so much in one lifetime, and this fear of fucking up and
Mhm.
like ruining my life. And the more I researched, I was like, hey, it's not that serious. Like it's just not that serious. So I like the idea selfishly of just helping myself, but realizing that other people, that's why I'm like, I am not interested in convincing anybody of anything. Like, that's not my role. But I
Yeah.
also understand that there is a certain level of validity that comes with taking a scientific approach and understand meeting people where they are. Like, I would not have opened myself up to any of this if there wasn't something beyond the spiritual aspect, if there wasn't some kind of like proof or evidence. So I try to blend those two things.
I
And
I would be the opposite. Like I feel like not that I'm a really anxious person in general, but I feel like if I was anxious, learning about this would make me even more anxious, give me more anxiety because that's a whole other field that like, okay, well, what happened in my past lives? Why am I like this now? Is it because of what happened in it drives me nuts. I mean, kind of wondering about it already, but
well,
there's, uh,
maybe that's why we're not supposed to all know, but
I mean, I'm curious. I wanna have like, there's this one crypto that I have. It's called Omi, and I put everything into it. I like all my entire net worth. Like I retired last year. I sold all my investments for this token because it's the only token associated with Disney. It's a top 10 grossing app that it
oh
pins.
well.
So it's going to blow up. But one of the things I've had an issue with is deciding how to uh, choose to, I guess, be responsible with it and not be like, oh, I just bought a yacht and a mansion and
Yeah.
just throw it away. So let me know on the research you do for if there are any scholarships. I'd be really curious to see a couple of these people talk about their past lives, like on a quantitative electroencephalography, and just see what parts of their brains light up
Yeah.
and have like controlled. Like, would you want to be part of it?
Hell yeah. Are you kidding me?
Okay,
Hasn't even
good.
occurred to me, but now my wheels are turning like maybe there is a thing like that. I mean, there
I
should
mean,
be. There's
if
not.
there's not, give me like 2 years and I'll help fund it. Like that'll
Deal.
be because
This
like
is
I love
recorded. You
something.
can't back out now. There are witnesses.
There are there's 19 people here. There'll be a lot more
Right.
that'll view afterwards.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
have you? So there was people like, have people ever noticed that they were reincarnated from not humans, and maybe they were reincarnated from like dogs, like the opposite of the movie Fluke? I don't know if you ever seen that.
I haven't, but I have definitely explored because this is a topic that comes up a lot. So um when you look at religion's take on it, there's a little bit of truth to every religion, but there's also a lot of distortion that happens in religion. And so Hinduism and Buddhism both teach reincarnation, and they're obviously I think Hinduism is the oldest known religion.
Yeah,
And they do, from my understanding, teach a type of transmigration where basically like you could be punished by like if you're bad in this life, you might become a grasshopper. And I haven't fully researched this, so I could be misunderstanding. That's my interpretation. I don't think that is accurate. I think that is a distortion. So from my research, everything has consciousness, everything, including the nails in the wall and the floor itself. So Toy Story has some truth to it because everything has a level of consciousness. But that's because, this is where it gets really convoluted, everything is a projection of you. Your reality is really you. We're just bigger than we think we are because we interact with other souls, but really everything that happens to you, you are on some level creating it. So it's all you. That's when they say that what you do to one person, you're doing to yourself, because you have literally, like for example, I'm holding this book. You can see the book, I can see the book, but there's two different books because you're literally creating a different book than I am. Because
Oh, like,
reality is literally your reality.
so like how if you know, me looking at you and like your husband looking at you, like clearly you're the same person, but you're different because who you are to one person, you're different to another.
Yes, but also literally there's three different bodies. Me looking at myself, I've created you.
Oh,
We're telepathically communicating to match up what we see. But so I'm telling you what to see. This is my body. This is the version of me, but you're technically recreating that.
yeah.
Yeah, it gets very convoluted. But anyway, with the animals and stuff. So animal consciousness is different from human consciousness, but yes, supposedly we are all experiencing that consciousness now because we have the ability, we're creating our own reality, but also we've all been animals and stuff, but like you don't go from being a human back to being a dog, but at some point you were probably a rock or a fly or a tree. And then it gets more complicated because as you evolve, you don't then become a dog again, but you can put your consciousness inside the mind of a dog to experience things. Supposedly, the early Native Americans, they're very like involved with animals culturally and stuff. So
Well,
supposedly, they had the ability to that we lost over time, the ability to be a human but project their consciousness in like a wolf, and then they would send the wolf to the top of the mountain to get like a view, or they would send their consciousness into an eagle so that they could get like a better view. They were not the eagle, but they were able to connect to the consciousness of the eagle, if that
yeah.
makes sense. And then supposedly animals evolve to a higher, they're kind of like a mass consciousness. And then when we as humans or other beings treat them as individuals like pets or are kind to them, we help elevate their consciousness and they eventually can become a human.
So they need that human interaction in order to go to like the next. Oh.
Yeah, that's why it's important for us to treat them kindly.
So what
Because
about like
that's
fish?
also why aliens treat us the way they do. They're trying to raise our consciousness.
Oh, I've been wanting to like I don't know what their technology's like, but I've put thoughts, I've like the spoken word out there, like aliens, if you want to come fix my back and fix my knees and my hips, like take whatever you want. Just
Yeah,
fix
I
it for
mean,
me.
maybe they will. Keep going. Keep trying.
I'm trying to will it into existence. So are so people that are like schizophrenic, are they actually seeing things that actually are there, but we're not tuned into it because we can't see it?
Yes. So
Mhm.
and again, I'm not a doctor, so don't come at me, but my understanding is part of the reason, it's kind of like what you said. My take on reincarnation was it helped me, but other people have a reaction where like, oh, this is kind of giving me more anxiety, right? So we're all at a different point. Part of the reason that we come and we don't remember all this stuff is because we're supposed to focus in this camouflaged reality virtual experience, right? And what happens is if you are exposed to too much of this information that your ego, not in the sense of traditional sense of ego, but like your consciousness can't handle certain information. Like if you are exposed to a certain level of certain types of drugs when you're not ready, or a traumatic experience and you can't handle it, what you're seeing and experiencing is real, but it's like you're short circuiting, so you're not able to
Oh,
function in this reality anymore because
yeah.
you couldn't find your way back. So that's where it becomes really
Oh wow.
difficult. because I like exposing people to this information. I think it's helpful, but like if something happens before you're ready, it is like you short circuit. You can't
No.
function in this reality anymore, which is another reason that supposedly when people have experiences, have certain intense dreams, or they have alien encounters, there is that shielding because they don't want to break you before you're ready. It's like for your own preservation so that you can keep functioning in this life, because if not, that's what will happen. It's too confusing.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be so ready now. Like
Right.
I wish I could. I mean, I say that, but it's like people say
I
like,
know, I
oh,
feel the same way. But even when people go, like I did have that hypnotherapy session and it was cool for me, but like I wanted more. But my subconscious would say, she's not ready, can't talk about it yet. And I was pissed. But I knew that, like, if you're not ready, then it's going to break you. So you have to like be patient and keep, even some of these books I've mentioned, I read them the first time and I was like, what? And then I'll go back and read them and I'd be like, oh, this makes more sense now. I have that foundation. But then I'll hit some other part and I'm like, I can't comprehend this. And then maybe one day I'll come back and it'll make sense. But all I can think of is it's like the spoon feeding, the small exposure over time.
yeah. So I would say, yeah. Do you think that anyone, like say, like the aliens that would be reincarnated as us, obviously they'd be so much smarter, and having to be reincarnated as someone that's really dumb. Do you think a lot of the aliens like we've seen, like, do you think that's Einstein? Like, there's no way a human just does that, or like Galileo that just invents calculus on like a dare, or even
Uh,
someone like
so
Tesla, or yeah,
yeah, they're Tesla 100%. But sometimes what's crazy about it is you've got um, one of the most advanced souls that I've read about is just this, like she's like working intergalactically on like um multiple planes of existence, not just like, oh, she's also an eight, like she's like multiple levels. um her human life is just like an average woman working as a receptionist in Arkansas, you know. Like that's but she's able to function as a human but not necessarily. So sometimes these are just advanced human souls who are just like they're tapped into the thought forms. But supposedly the aliens like put out these thoughts to just the general population in hopes that somebody will pick it up, and somebody like Einstein is open enough to receive it. And he may think, oh, I thought
oh
this thing, but like sometimes it's just he's doctors that like discover things. Sometimes it's like these advanced beings telepathically putting it out there, but it's like you have to be open to receive it.
yeah,
And that's why these people, like especially somebody like Einstein, who slept so sporadically, he had that sleep schedule of like only, so he was kind of had one foot in both realities. He was more
yeah,
tapped into that. But other people on that kind of sleep schedule, it would break them because they weren't, so
yeah. I I see some, even not even just like intelligent stuff. I guess intelligence is measured many different ways. People like Paul McCartney that would get songs in dreams. Like
yeah,
how the fuck do you do that? So
yeah.
that makes a little bit
Tap
more
into
sense.
that higher self.
Yeah,
Yeah. A lot of artistic um but they're still living their human experience. So they
yeah,
still distort it, but they're still tapping into something that sometimes it takes generations to recognize what that is. You look back on some of these writers and you're like, holy shit. But like they were ahead of their time
yeah.
because
You ever
we have
read
to
Fahrenheit?
evolve as a conscious, like a mass consciousness too. So that's where it gets tricky, is we're trying to all evolve.
Yeah. How does that work where you have people like that are like so advanced, or you have civilizations that are so advanced, and then you still have like third world countries that don't have internet, and then you still have tribes that like uncontacted in like the Congo or in wherever, and they just they don't speak any real language that we can tell. How and this is going to get way into like eugenics, whatever. Like, are those beings like holding us back from elevating? Because you'd imagine you have like the top percent of like the people that really get it, that are really smart, and then like the bottom percent of beings that just aren't, and our consciousness as humanity is just in the middle because it's the average. Is that how that works? I don't know.
I mean, it's a valid question. But I think also we can't get too boxed in with that, because another aspect is sometimes a really advanced soul will come back as a person who with not birth defects, but like what's the word I'm looking for? Like mental retardation or like a physical ailment, because they're advanced. They're not holding society back, but they are putting society in a position to, so it's less about the intellect and more about
So like a
the love,
test.
spirituality aspect. So like these
Mhm.
cultures who maybe don't have the science that we have, but they're more open in other more spiritual ways. Maybe they have a better way of like treating each other, or maybe they are more like, I don't know, cannibalistic or something. So it's less about the scientific intelligence. Sometimes an advanced soul will come back as specifically choose to have someone who with a limited intellect. They'll choose to be, you know, not as smart because they don't want to hold themselves back spiritually.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so, for example, if you have a person who's living in a society like a big city and they have access, but they're like killing people or they're just treating people like shit all the time, like they're holding us back more
Yeah.
than some other culture, because what we're supposed to be evolving is like taking care of each other and kindness and love and evolving, you know,
Yeah, that
beyond.
makes sense.
Yeah.
I see that. So there's a
So many times the aliens have even, or advanced spirits, because they're different, have given us information that we made a nuclear bomb instead of using that
it's like
technology for what it was. So they can't, so we have to wait for like us to evolve, you know, and
yeah,
sometimes we just don't use it, but it's the balance of we still have free will. So they can't like push themselves on us, but they try to expose us to stuff. But if we manipulate it in the wrong way, then they like, okay, well, it's like a toddler. If you're going to throw the toy at your sister, then I'm not going to give you another toy.
yeah, to deal with the consequences of that, and consequence of that is burning hundreds of thousands of our own. Yeah, so I get it. Uh, I wonder if there's a way that we could force alien intervention, like if we're at like 5 minutes to midnight and nuclear holocaust is like imminent. Do you think at that point aliens be like, all
Yeah.
right, guys, we
According to the Dolores Cannon books, yeah, there have been instances like that where it's like, hey, it's no longer you destroying your own planet. You're like fucking with, it's like there's going to be an echo that affects the other places. So now we
oh,
have to
so
like,
it's like already happened where they've like intervened. Like,
supposedly.
did she say in like what time periods? Like in the Cold War or
She did go into some, and I just don't remember, but I know it's been discussed. I think, and I can send you links for some of the books that go into
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I I've been really
And then
curious
there's
about
supposedly like an upcoming time with that sounds like end times. We're always on the, you know, so I don't want to be like that person, like the end is near, but like supposedly, and this then again, this was written in the 80s or 90s when we were on the cusp of like, have
the
you heard
post
people
Cold
talk
War.
about like the new earth or supposedly we've gotten to a point where like there's kind of a split where half the population is ready to evolve, but there is part of the that's kind of stuck on the karmic wheel and not evolving. And we're splitting, but this gets really confusing because even we know Earth as Earth, but
Yeah.
there are other galaxies and other beings, but there's also other planes on Earth. So I wanted to bring this up earlier. Sometimes when you're seeing something, you are seeing like a person who is a ghost, but sometimes it's not like an apparition the way that we think of like, oh, a human died. It's actually an existence that's happening on Earth, but we're not on the same frequency and we accidentally see it because we tap into that frequency. Like if you're listening to the radio and you have a station you're listening to, but you drive through an area and they overlap. And in that sense, sometimes you are the ghost for other people. You are the apparition that they talk about, and you're just living your life. You're not trying to scare anybody, but like they
Yeah.
tap into your frequency, and so it crosses over because supposedly there's life on other planets, even like Mars, for example. But like we will never find it with our scientific instruments because we are looking for a physical experience when they're beings who are at a higher pitch. And so until we can tap into that frequency, we just don't see them, even if we're on Mars. So again, now I sound like a crazy person, but
No, I get it. That's and I guess you can't prove or disprove it either way. But there's
right, that's where it gets tricky. You're like, oh, well, you can say anything, but like
uh,
the proof is that you can't prove it. So like,
I don't know. I feel like what if there was and not that not that I would ever do this, but it's just a scenario in my head would be like, okay, well, if I could become president and then just be like, all right, I'm just gonna bomb everyone unless aliens come in here right now and stop me. I don't know what would it take. I mean, I know you said it's happened before, like you said, like late 80s, early 90s, on like the cusp of that. Or do you think it's happened like, oh, that's why the last ice age happened, or that's why the last ice age ended abruptly because of alien intervention
Yes.
and
Well,
exodus?
sometimes they didn't stop it, and we have been supposedly more advanced civilizations on Earth that died out. So you have civilizations that existed before what we know of as our origins that became so advanced that they just evolved and pieced out. Like, hey, we're done with Earth.
Yeah,
And then you have some that like fucked up real bad, and so they aliens. Here's the other thing: because they are more evolved than we are, aliens or spiritual beings. That doesn't mean they know everything. They're still learning on their own level. So
that's
they've done
true.
things where they're like, hey, we tried this method and it didn't work. And now we're going to just let y'all try to figure it out. Nope, we got to come back. So there's like all kinds of layers to that.
What do you think about the James Webb Telescope pictures that came out recently? And what they were trying to do is like saying, okay, well, if this is the edge of the universe, they had looked at galaxies that are 200 million years away, light years away from the edge of the universe, which means that you're seeing only about 200 million years, pretty much after like the Big Bang. Like, it should take billions of years for these galaxies to form. So people are thinking that like the farther away you look, the more back in time you're going, and you would only see like these star clusters maybe, and you'd see some dust. But now they're seeing that these pictures are showing they're fully formed galaxies, and some are even like more full like than ours. And like this doesn't make sense. There's
Yeah.
only like 200 million years away from the Big Bang. It should take billions of years for that to happen. Uh, what do you how do you interpret that as? Because there a lot of people are saying that we need a new interpretation of the Big Bang. Like some people are saying it's not true now. Some
Yeah.
scientists are going like losing their minds.
Yeah. Well, again, I am definitely not fully educated on this
Yeah.
at all. But I will say that from what I've read, it doesn't surprise me just because I think we have a time as we know it is just not the way it really is. So I
Mm.
think that there's probably a distortion of our interpretation of time. I think there's definitely, I don't think the Big Bang didn't happen. I just think there's more to it. You know what I mean? Like I think it's bigger than we are like ready to
Like
comprehend.
we're leaving pieces out that we just haven't figured
I think
out
there's
where to
just like
place
more
them.
that we, yeah, that we just don't know yet.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
feel you. So this has been hella interesting. I know you are with your family now because you had to. There's a hurricane where you
Yeah.
were,
Yeah.
um,
We
and
got
you had to back.
evacuated. So that's fun.
When can you go back?
I think the storm isn't supposed to hit until like like after midnight tonight. So it's just really hard to
Oh,
know.
okay. Yeah.
So we're definitely in the path, and then we have because the buildings in those areas are built to withstand a hurricane, but then you have so it's less about hey we might die. It's more about the flooding and then the power going out and then like all the other stuff. I don't know how long it'll take for us to like we don't know how we'll be affected basically.
Yeah. So that'll be a, oh geez, so that would be, I think it's a category 3, right? Considering?
Yeah, so it was estimated as a category 3, and then they were hoping it would just be a tropical storm. And then last I heard, they were saying it might actually be category 4
Oh no.
instead of lessening.
Oh
Um,
geez.
yeah.
Does that make you kind of rethink? We should probably get a second home somewhere, up more inland.
I honestly, I don't know. This is one of those things where, in our case, we just moved down to that area, but we didn't even like fully move. We decided to like do short-term rentals and kind of travel a bit for the next year. So we were like literally staying in Airbnb, right there on the bay. So it was all very new to us. We've never lived in Florida before. But we happened to be out of town in Tennessee and Georgia this week
Yeah.
when we got the news we were evacuating. So we were like, I don't know if that's like my inner being or something else telling me, hey, don't come down yet. But it worked out for us.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
so all things considered, we're in a very good circumstance.
I'll be there next year. Can't wait. I mean, I'll go on
Oh,
vacation before then, but I'll be going down. I've said this before, is my last winter in New York, and then I am gonna bounce. I
Yeah,
hate the cold so
can't blame
much.
you there. Yeah, I remember you talking about Florida. I would say not during a hurricane, but otherwise, totally recommend it.
Yeah, I'll be a snowbird. I'll be there for winter at least.
Yeah, we're the snowbird capital of the world, basically. So, yeah,
Nice. Oh,
yeah.
so like I said, we've been going for a little bit over an hour. Is there anything that you wanted to say that we haven't gone over yet? Anything you want to tell the audience?
I feel like we've covered so many. We've talked about dreams and aliens and ghost and reincarnation.
UFOs,
Like,
yeah.
what's left? You know. Um, yeah. Check out our book, even though it has nothing to do with anything we talked about, except that it is good in every timeline, and you should go buy that. And if you
Yes.
want to follow me on TikTok at Jenn Pickett, I post more videos of this nature. So, or
Yeah,
Instagram.
the TikToks over there, you can find the link tree for Instagram, for TikTok, for I think you have like 3 different TikToks.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I'm
so
like you. Like I have all these different personalities. I'm like, oh, we do the comedy stuff, and then we do all this stuff. I do like connecting with people on social media, especially because I like hearing other people's stories. Like I love reading about this stuff, but like if anyone has like, oh, I've seen a ghost, or I've had this encounter with an alien, or I remember my past life, or this drink, I love that. So if they want to follow me and tell me their
yeah,
stuff, maybe
cool
I'll
beans.
write a book about it one day.
Yeah, do it. Do it in one of your books. Do it in I don't. I feel like you have what, like several 100,000 followers across all platforms,
Yeah.
and like, do you get recognized? I mean, I get recognized every now and then. I imagine you do.
Every now and then, but I think the difference is when I'm on video, I'm like, my hair is freshly washed and I'm wearing makeup. And in person, I'm like wearing a hoodie and my hair is pulled back and no makeup. So yes and no. Yeah.
I understand that. Yeah, you guys are like witches. You can look completely different with with makeup on, and I also feel like every now and then, like, if I like brush my hair or if I just shave, I look okay on camera, but then in person, like I said, I'll just look like a goblin. I'll just look at Orc from Lord of the Rings. But yeah, we did talk about the fourth kind a little bit because you were mentioning owls, and you've seen the fourth kind, right?
I haven't.
Sure.
Oh, I lost.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow,
I don't.
that freaked you out. You like disappeared.
Yeah. um, yeah, it's like the government saying like, no, no, don't watch it.
Which the government is 100% knows about aliens. We know that. Like they 100% have been working deals forever. They're just waiting for the general public to like be ready. So
ready. How do we convince? I feel like they probably just want that power forever. Like they probably just like, no, we're privileged. Like I feel like they want to feel special, and they like, oh, these
some truth to that. Yeah.
lesser beings can't handle it. But yeah, watch that movie. It's really good.
Okay.
I'll end the broadcast. I'll just talk to you for a quick minute after off camera. All right. Thank you guys for joining. Go subscribe. Go do everything. All right. I love you guys. Bye.
Yeah.